The emergency council chamber of the Galactic Federation buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 different species gathered around the circular table. Each delegate wore protective suits, their breathing apparatus filtering out any trace of the deadly substance that had brought them together in crisis. Ambassador of the Crystalline Hegemony's voice crackled through his vocoder. The situation has become critical. The water contamination has spread to 17 systems now. Entire colonies are evacuating. The pale blue Aquarian delegate, Flux Prime, rippled with distress. We had to abandon the surface entirely. The water there burns through our biofilters in minutes. Admiral the Towering from the Hive Collective clicked his mandibles anxiously. My species has lost 3 breeding colonies. The water seepage destroyed our nursery chambers. Billions of larvae gone. At the far end of the table, the member of the council sat quietly. Ambassador Sarah represented humanity, the species that had joined the Federation only 2 standard cycles ago. She listened intently, her expression growing more confused with each horrific account. "I'm sorry," Sarah interrupted politely. "Did you say water as in H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen?" The room fell silent. Every compound eye, optical sensor, and sensing organ turned toward the human. His crystalline form pulsed with agitation. "Of course we mean monoxide, human, the most corrosive substance in the known galaxy. What else would we be discussing?" Sarah blinked several times, processing this information. I think there might be some confusion here. Water isn't corrosive to humans. We actually need it to survive." The silence that followed was deafening. Then chaos erupted. "Impossible," shrieked the avian representative, her feathers standing on end. "No organic life can survive direct contact with pure water." Flux Prime's form in shock. "Are you saying your species can touch the substance?" Sarah reached into her diplomatic pouch and a clear bottle. The other delegates immediately recoiled, some diving under the table, others activating emergency shields. "Please, everyone stay calm," Sarah called out. "It's just my drinking water." "Drinking?" The word echoed from a dozen different translators in a cacophony of alien languages. Admiral was pressed against the far wall, his entire exoskeleton trembling. "Ambassador, please put that weapon away immediately." Sarah stared at the bottle in her hand, then at the terrified aliens around her. Slowly, deliberately, she unscrewed the cap. The sound of the plastic threading seemed unnaturally loud in the chamber. "Watch," she said softly, then raised the bottle to her lips and took a long drink. 3 delegates fainted immediately. The crystalline ambassador's form flickered between states of matter. One of the gas beings dispersed entirely, only to reform moments later in apparent shock. Sarah wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "See, perfectly safe. Humans are about 70% water, actually." The room erupted again, but this time with a different energy. Delegates were frantically calling there, speaking in rapid bursts of their native languages. Managed to stabilize his form enough to speak. "Ambassador, if what you claim is true, this changes everything. The contamination zones that have forced us to abandon entire star systems could be perfectly habitable for humans," Sarah finished. "How extensive is this water contamination?" The avian delegate, still perched nervously on her chair, pulled up a holographic display. "These are the affected systems." The map showed large swaths of the galaxy marked in warning red. Sarah studied the display with growing excitement. "These aren't contamination zones. These are potential new worlds for human expansion, rich with the very substance we need most." Doctor, the tentacled scientist from the Deep Ocean Collective, floated forward cautiously. "Human, would your species be willing to investigate one of these zones? For scientific purposes, of course." Sarah smiled. "I think we'd be more than willing. In fact, I suspect my government would be very interested in these contaminated worlds." Admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep thought among his species. "The implications are staggering. Worlds we've written off as uninhabitable death traps could be paradise for your people." "And in exchange," Sarah said, her diplomatic training kicking in, "humanity could help clean up the water contamination from systems where your species need to return. It's a win-win situation." The council chamber buzzed with activity as delegates consulted with their governments. What had begun as an emergency session about an expanding catastrophe was rapidly transforming into something else entirely. Flux Prime rippled with what might have been hope. Our surface, if humans could somehow neutralize the water there. We don't need to neutralize it, Sarah explained. We can live with it, use it, even enjoy it. Human colonies could be established in the water-rich areas while your people reclaim the dry regions. The implications were staggering. For decades, the galactic community had lived in terror of water contamination. Entire trade routes had been abandoned. Colonies had been evacuated at the first sign of moisture. Billions had been spent on water detection systems and protective equipment. And now they were learning that, to at least one species, water wasn't a terrible contaminant. It was a life-giving necessity. Its crystalline structure had stabilized into what his species displayed when deep in thought. We must verify these claims, of course. No offense intended, Ambassador, but the safety of entire civilizations is at stake. Sarah nodded. I completely understand. I'd suggest starting with a small test. Perhaps I could visit one of your mildly contaminated research stations, under controlled conditions with full monitoring. The idea sent another wave of nervous energy through the chamber, but Doctor was already pulling up research data. There's Station Kappa 7 in the Helix Nebula. It was abandoned last cycle due to water seepage in the lower levels. The contamination is contained but significant. Admiral's tactical mind was already working. If the human can survive there, if she can actually help us reclaim contaminated areas. The military applications alone, whispered the reptilian delegate who had been silent until now. Worlds we've ceded to the water plague could become strategic strongholds again. Sarah raised her hand for attention. Before we get ahead of ourselves, I should probably contact my government. They'll want to send a proper scientific team, maybe some engineers. If we're going to be helping with large-scale decontamination, we'll need the right equipment. What she didn't mention, what she was only beginning to realize, was the incredible advantage this gave humanity in galactic politics. Access to worlds that every other species considered uninhabitable. Resources that had been abandoned as too dangerous to recover. Territory that was literally free for the taking because no one else could survive there. The meeting continued for hours as delegates worked out the preliminary details of what would become known as the Water Accord. Sarah found herself at the center of the most significant diplomatic breakthrough in galactic history, all because she had brought a bottle of water to a meeting. As the session finally wound down, approached her privately. Ambassador, I must ask, are there other substances that are deadly to us but harmless to humans? Sarah considered the question carefully. Well, there's alcohol, caffeine, chocolate, carbon dioxide in certain concentrations. The crystalline being's form flickered with what might have been excitement or terror. We have much to discuss, it seems. Looking out through the chamber's viewing port at the vast expanse of space beyond, Sarah realized that humanity was about to become far more important in galactic affairs than anyone had ever imagined. The phone call she was about to make to Earth would change everything. The emergency council session had been called to address a growing catastrophe. It was ending with the potential solution to dozens of problems the galactic community had thought unsolvable. And at the center of it all was something as simple and common as a drink of water. The real revelations were yet to come. Station Kappa 7 hung like a wounded bird in the void, its lower sections sealed off with bright yellow contamination warnings. 3 weeks had passed since the emergency council session, and now humanity's response team approached the supposedly deadly research facility. Doctor pressed his face against the transport's viewport, watching the station grow larger. Hard to believe something so simple could terrify an entire galaxy, he muttered to his companion. Engineer Lisa checked her equipment one final time. Simple for us. Remember, these species evolved on worlds where water is either non-existent or exists in forms we can't even imagine. To them, liquid H2O is like swimming in acid. The communications array crackled to life. Human transport vessel, this is station control. Please confirm your protective status. The voice belonged to Doctor, who had volunteered to oversee the experiment despite his species' terror of water. Activated the comm. Station control, we're approaching without any water protection. Repeat, no protective gear. A long pause. Understood. May the void have mercy on your spirits. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Cheerful bunch. The docking procedure took longer than usual, with multiple redundant safety checks and emergency protocols. When they finally sealed with the station's airlock, the computer systems went into overdrive, scanning for any trace of contamination. Contamination detected, the system announced in a flat, mechanical voice. Extreme water saturation in docking bay 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Override safety protocols, came Doctor's voice over the intercom. This is a controlled experiment. Maintain monitoring only. The airlock cycled open and stepped onto the station. The air was clean and dry, too dry for human comfort, actually. But their sensors showed water vapor from their breath, and the moisture naturally present in their bodies was triggering every alarm system on the station. A holographic projection of Doctor appeared in the corridor, his tentacled form flickering slightly. Humans, can you hear me? Are you experiencing any burning sensations, tissue dissolution, cellular breakdown? Stretched casually. Feeling fine, Doc. Actually, the air's a bit dry. Could use more humidity. The projection wavered as Doctor's shock transmitted through the hologram. More humidity? You want more water vapor in the air. Standard human habitats maintain about 40 to 60% humidity, Lisa explained, unpacking her equipment. This feels like maybe 10%. It's going to make our throats scratchy. By the dark deep, Doctor whispered. They're complaining it's not wet enough. The first test was simple, and Lisa walked through the upper levels of the station, their every movement tracked by dozens of sensors. The station's AI kept up a running commentary of horror as it detected water vapor, mineral traces, and organic compounds that would be lethal to any other known species. Life signs stable, Lisa reported, speaking to the cameras that tracked their movement. Temperature normal, no discomfort, ready to proceed to Level 2. Level 2 had been abandoned for 6 months. The corridor leading to it was sealed with multiple barriers, and warning lights flashed in alien languages that all essentially said, death beyond this point. When they broke the seals, atmospheric analyzers went insane. The humidity in Level 2 was nearly 30%, practically a water world by galactic standards. Oh, this is much better, said, breathing deeply. You can actually feel the moisture in the air. Through their communication link, they could hear Doctor frantically consulting with other researchers. They say it's better. How is the water not eating their lungs from the inside? Lisa was setting up her equipment while explored the abandoned laboratories. The rooms were pristine, evacuated so quickly that experiments were left half-finished. But there was no visible water damage, no corrosion, just the trace moisture that had terrified an entire research crew into fleeing. Doc called out, what exactly were your people studying down here? Atmospheric processing, came the reply. We were trying to develop better filtration systems to remove water vapor from colonial air supplies. The experiment malfunctioned. Humidity reached catastrophic levels. Lisa looked at her readings and started laughing. Come see this. Her atmospheric analyzer showed humidity at 32%. Temperature was a comfortable 21 degrees Celsius. Air pressure was within normal human ranges. This isn't a contamination zone, Lisa announced. This is a perfectly comfortable human environment. You could run a colony here. The silence from the alien researchers was telling. Activated his comm unit. Doctor, we're ready to proceed to Level 3, the heavy contamination zone. Absolutely not. The tentacled scientist's projection appeared with unusual intensity. Level 3 has standing water, actual liquid pools of the substance. No living being can survive such exposure. How much water are we talking about? Lisa asked. Puddles as deep as several centimeters. The air is nearly saturated with vapor. It's worse than any ocean world. And Lisa exchanged glances. They'd been prepared for this. Doc, we're going to Level 3. We'll take full precautions. What precautions could possibly be adequate? We'll bring towels, Lisa said dryly. The descent to Level 3 required overriding multiple safety systems. The station's AI kept broadcasting evacuation warnings as they approached what it considered a lethal environment. When the final seal opened, stepped into what the galactic community would consider hell on Earth. The floor had small puddles of clear water, maybe 2 or 3 centimeters deep at most. The air was humid enough that their breath was slightly visible. Condensation formed on some of the cooler surfaces. "It's like a spa," Lisa commented, kneeling down beside one of the puddles. "The water's clean, too, no contamination at all." She cupped some in her hand and took a sip. The sounds from the monitoring station suggested that several researchers had just fainted. "Taste test complete," she reported cheerfully. "Standard H2O, slight mineral content, perfectly drinkable." Was recording everything with his handheld scanner. The environment was not just survivable, it was pleasant. The temperature was warm but comfortable, the humidity refreshing after the dry upper levels. Doctor called out, "How long has this level been considered uninhabitable?" 8 months, came the weak reply. "We lost contact with the research team when the water first appeared. We assumed they died instantly." "What happened to them?" "Emergency evacuation to the orbital platform. They're still there, in quarantine, being treated for water exposure." Lisa was walking around, splashing through the shallow puddles with her boots. "You mean they're being treated for getting slightly damp?" The implications were staggering. Started doing quick calculations in his head. "Doc, how many facilities like this exist? How many worlds have been abandoned due to water contamination?" "Hundreds of stations, dozens of worlds. Some were evacuated when humidity reached as low as 15%. 15%, Lisa stopped walking. "We consider that practically desert dry. And colonies with standing water. There are 17 inhabited worlds that had to be completely evacuated due to water emergence. The largest was new, population 8 million. They left everything behind when underground aquifers broke through to the surface." And Lisa stared at each other. 8 million people evacuated from a world because it had developed natural springs and lakes. "Doctor said carefully, what would happen if humans colonized these abandoned worlds?" "Colonized, but the water levels would be perfect for us. We need water to survive. Worlds with natural water sources are exactly what humanity has been looking for." The conversation that followed was conducted through several translation protocols as Doctor consulted with the Galactic leadership. What emerged was a picture of vast areas of space that had been written off as uninhabitable, filled with worlds that would be paradise for human settlement. "There's more," Doctor finally admitted. "The water zones, they're expanding. We think it's some kind of galactic climate shift. More and more systems are showing water contamination every cycle." Lisa began to understand. "You're not just dealing with isolated incidents. This is happening everywhere." The hegemony's scientists believe that within 10 cycles, water contamination could affect up to 40% of currently inhabited systems. The full scope of the crisis and opportunity was becoming clear. The galactic community was facing what they saw as an expanding catastrophe that would force mass evacuations and economic collapse. But from humanity's perspective, it was the largest expansion of habitable territory in galactic history. Activated his communication array to contact Earth. "This is Doctor reporting from Station Kappa 7, requesting immediate consultation with Colonial Administration and the Department of Interstellar Affairs. We have a situation here." As he prepared his report, Lisa continued her examination of Level 3. What she was documenting would reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. The other species saw death and devastation. Humans saw opportunity and abundance. The real question was how to handle this information diplomatically. Humanity was about to become incredibly important to the galactic community, but they had to manage that transition carefully. The galaxy's greatest fear had become humanity's greatest opportunity. 6 months after the Station Kappa 7 experiment, the Galactic Federation's emergency assembly hall had never been so crowded. Representatives from 47 species filled the expanded chambers, while countless more participated via quantum link from across the galaxy. Ambassador Sarah stood at the central podium, no longer the quiet newcomer she had been during that first water crisis meeting. The data pad in her hands contained information that would reshape galactic civilization. "The preliminary survey results are conclusive," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the translator networks. "Of the 237 worlds previously abandoned due to water contamination, humanity has classified 212 as suitable for immediate colonization." A ripple of complex emotions passed through the assembled delegates. Relief, amazement, and something approaching envy all mixed together in the alien equivalent of murmurs. Fleet Admiral leaned forward in his specialized chair. Ambassador, please clarify the timeline for human expansion into these territories. Sarah smiled diplomatically. That depends largely on the terms we establish here today. Humanity is prepared to offer several collaboration models. She activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Vast sections that had been marked in warning red for decades now glowed with the soft blue of potential human colonies. Option 1, direct colonization with territorial concessions. Humanity establishes colonies in water-contaminated zones while ceding certain resource rights to previous inhabitants. This allows your species to reclaim dry portions of abandoned worlds. The crystalline delegate pulsed with interest. What percentage of resource concessions? Negotiable, but we're thinking 40% of non-water resources. Mining rights, rare minerals, energy sources, things we need to trade for technology and resources that exist more readily in traditional galactic territories. Doctor's holographic form shimmered as he processed this. You would give us nearly half of everything you extract, simply for the right to live in environments we consider lethal. Doctor, you have to understand, these aren't just livable environments for us. They're ideal. Worlds with natural water cycles, established ecosystems, existing infrastructure that just needs to be reactivated. We're not asking for charity. We're offering to solve your biggest problem while gaining access to worlds that would take us decades to terraform from scratch. The avian representative's feathers ruffled with what might have been calculation. Option 2. Sarah changed the display. Joint occupation and remediation. Human colonies take responsibility for water-affected areas while your species maintains settlements in the dry zones. We work together to establish optimal environmental boundaries. Interesting, mused the representative from the gas giant collectives. This would allow us to maintain our territorial claims while regaining access to resources. Exactly. Some of your species have particularly valuable installations on these worlds. Rather than abandoning them entirely, we could maintain them for you while expanding our own presence in the water-rich areas. Fleet Admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly. The military implications are significant, shared defensive responsibilities for strategically important worlds. Sarah nodded, which brings us to option 3, the Mutual Defense Compact. The display shifted to show strategic star maps. Humanity colonizes water-affected worlds in exchange for full integration into galactic defense networks. Human worlds become forward operating bases for joint fleet operations. This caused considerable stir among the military representatives. The idea of humans not just as colonists, but as strategic partners was clearly appealing to some and concerning to others. Ambassador from the Traders' Union spoke for the first time. What assurances do we have that humanity won't simply claim these territories and refuse further cooperation? Sarah had been expecting this question. Excellent point. We propose a phased integration system with built-in safeguards. She activated a new section of the display. Phase 1, joint research stations on 12 selected worlds. Human and alien scientists work together to establish optimal cohabitation protocols. Duration, 2 standard years. Phase 2, limited colonization of 25 worlds under direct Federation oversight. Human settlements restricted to water-affected areas with strict boundary agreements. Duration, 5 standard years. Phase 3, full integration. Successful colonies become permanent, with expansion to additional worlds based on demonstrated cooperation. Doctor's tentacles writhed with what his species displayed when processing complex information. This is far more structured than we anticipated. Most new species demand immediate territorial concessions. We're not most species, Sarah replied. Humanity understands that we're newcomers to galactic civilization. We want to prove ourselves as reliable partners, not aggressive expansionists. What she didn't say, what everyone in the room was thinking, was that humanity didn't need to be aggressive. The water contamination was expanding on its own, creating new opportunities faster than humans could possibly colonize them. Its crystalline form stabilized into a configuration that indicated deep thought. There are rumors, unconfirmed reports. of other substances that affect us differently than they affect humans. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but internally she was smiling. The research teams had indeed discovered other areas where human physiology provided unique advantages. Alcohol-based compounds that were lethal to most species. Certain atmospheric compositions that were toxic to alien life, but harmless to humans. Even some forms of radiation that human biology could tolerate better than most galactic species. Perhaps those could be topics for future discussion, she said carefully. Today we're focused on addressing the water crisis that affects so many of your worlds. The reptilian delegate who had been silent through most of the session finally spoke. There is another matter, the Void Hunters. The chamber fell silent. The Void Hunters were a nomadic species that had been raiding galactic settlements for centuries, always striking at isolated colonies before disappearing into the empty regions between star systems. They've been increasingly targeting water-contaminated worlds, the reptilian continued. We assumed they had some immunity to the substance, but if humans can not only survive but thrive in these environments. Fleet Admiral caught the implication immediately. Human colonies in water-rich systems would be naturally defended against Void Hunter raids. They couldn't survive long enough to establish footholds for attacks. And human military installations in these systems could serve as early warning networks for their movements, added the Admiral from the Outer Rim Defense Force. Sarah realized they had just moved beyond simple colonization discussions into strategic military planning. Humanity would be honored to contribute to galactic security efforts. The voting process took several hours, with delegates consulting there and analyzing the economic implications. But when it was complete, the results were overwhelming. 43 species voted in favor of the comprehensive human integration package, with only 4 abstentions and no negative votes. As the session wound down, Sarah found herself surrounded by delegates eager to discuss specific arrangements for their particular territories. The transformation was remarkable. 6 months ago, she had been representing humanity as a junior member of the galactic community. Now they were being courted as essential partners in solving galaxy-wide problems. Doctor approached her privately as the chamber emptied. "Ambassador, there's something else. The deep space monitoring stations have detected what appears to be massive water emergence in the Andromeda approach vectors." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "How massive?" "Entire solar systems. We're talking about water contamination on a scale that could affect thousands of worlds over the next few decades." The implications hit her immediately. If water emergence was happening on such a vast scale, humanity wasn't just gaining access to a few abandoned worlds. They were potentially looking at territorial expansion beyond anything they had ever imagined. "Doctor, how many species know about this yet?" "The information is classified at the highest levels, perhaps a dozen individuals across the entire galaxy." Sarah considered this carefully. Humanity was about to become far more than just helpful partners in galactic affairs. They were potentially the only species capable of expanding into vast regions of space that would be uninhabitable to everyone else. "We should schedule a private consultation," she said. "This kind of information requires very careful handling." As Sarah prepared to transmit her report to Earth, she reflected on how rapidly everything had changed. Humanity had joined the galactic community as minor players seeking knowledge and technology. They were becoming major powers in their own right, with unique capabilities that made them invaluable to galactic civilization. The emergency session that had begun with panic over water contamination was ending with humanity positioned to become one of the most influential species in the galaxy. And if Doctor's information about the Andromeda vectors was accurate, this was only the beginning. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was uniquely positioned to thrive in that change. What had started with a simple drink of water in a diplomatic meeting had evolved into a complete transformation of galactic politics. The real question now was how to manage this new power responsibly while ensuring that humanity's expansion benefited not just Earth, but the entire galactic community. The water that terrified every other known species had become the key to humanity's future among the stars.